Have you ever felt someone slowly drifting away from you without ever saying goodbye? At first, everything felt normal. The connection was real. Conversations flowed easily. There was warmth in the small things. The way they looked at you, the way they replied to your messages, the way they made you feel seen. For a moment, it felt safe to believe something meaningful was growing between you. But then something strange started happening. Not suddenly, not loudly, quietly. The messages became shorter. The replies started taking longer. The emotional depth that once filled your conversations slowly faded into silence. Nothing dramatic happened. No big argument. No clear explanation. Just a quiet distance that began expanding between two people who once felt close. And this is where the confusion begins. Because when someone you care about starts pulling away, your mind immediately starts searching for answers. You replay conversations. You analyze every message. You wonder if you said something wrong. You wonder if you became too much, too emotional, too available, too invested. The human mind hates uncertainty. When we cannot understand why something is changing, we start blaming ourselves. And that is exactly what happens in many relationships with avoidant individuals. But what if the distance you are feeling is not actually about you? What if the space they are creating is not a sign of lost feelings, but a reaction to something much deeper inside their psychology? If you stay with me until the end of this video, you will understand something that most people in relationships never realize. You will understand the invisible psychological shift that happens inside avoidant partners. The moment when closeness begins to feel like pressure, and the moment when a relationship quietly approaches what psychologists call the point of no return. Because the truth about avoidant relationships is not simple. It is not about love disappearing. It is not about someone suddenly losing interest. It is about something much more complicated happening inside the human nervous system. Avoidant individuals often experience emotional closeness differently than most people. For many people, intimacy feels comforting. Sharing emotions creates connection. Vulnerability builds trust. But for someone with avoidant tendencies, emotional closeness can activate a completely different internal response. Instead of comfort, their system feels tension. Instead of safety, their mind feels pressure. Instead of connection, they feel a sudden urge for space. And this reaction is rarely conscious. Most avoidant individuals are not sitting there planning to distance themselves. They are not trying to confuse you. They are not intentionally creating emotional chaos. In fact, many of them are just as confused by their own reactions, because everything may feel perfect in the beginning. At the start of a relationship, closeness feels exciting. There is curiosity. There is attraction. There is the thrill of discovering someone new. Emotional walls remain relaxed because the connection still feels light and manageable. But something begins to change when the relationship becomes deeper. When emotional expectations grow, when attachment forms, when the connection starts becoming real, that is when the avoidant nervous system begins reacting. The deeper the bond becomes, the stronger their internal alarm system starts whispering something dangerous in the background. You are losing your freedom. You are becoming responsible for someone else's emotions. You might get trapped. You might get hurt. These thoughts do not always appear clearly in their mind. Sometimes they appear as subtle discomfort, sometimes as unexplained irritation, sometimes as a sudden desire for independence. And this is where the push and pull begins. One moment they feel close to you. The next moment they feel the urge to step back. One moment they share something personal. The next moment they become emotionally distant. This pattern confuses the person on the other side of the relationship because the signals become mixed. You remember the warmth they showed before. You remember the closeness that once existed. And because of that memory, you believe the distance must be temporary. So you try harder. You try to communicate more. You try to reassure them. You try to fix the distance that appeared. But what most people do not realize is that this is the exact moment when the psychology of the relationship begins shifting. Because when someone with avoidant tendencies begins feeling emotionally overwhelmed, their mind does something very specific. It searches for space, not because they stopped caring, but because distance feels like safety. And here is the painful paradox. The more you try to close the emotional gap, the more their mind feels pressure. The more they feel pressure, the stronger their instinct to pull away becomes. This is not a simple misunderstanding. This is a psychological pattern rooted in early emotional experiences. Many avoidant individuals learned very early in life that relying on others could lead to disappointment, rejection, or emotional suffocation. So their mind adapted. It developed a strategy for protection. Stay independent, stay emotionally controlled, never rely too deeply on someone else. At first, this strategy helps them feel safe. But in close relationships, that same strategy slowly begins creating distance where closeness should exist. And most partners never see this process happening in real time. They only feel the result. The silence, the unanswered messages, the sudden emotional coldness, the strange feeling that the person they once connected with is slowly becoming someone else. But what you are witnessing is not random behavior. You are witnessing the beginning of a deeper psychological shift. A shift that happens quietly, a shift that many people misunderstand, and a shift that slowly moves a relationship toward the moment where everything changes. To understand this, we have to look deeper than behavior. We have to look at the internal world of an avoidant mind, because the withdrawal you see on the outside is only a symptom. The real process is happening quietly inside their psychology. Avoidant individuals usually develop a powerful emotional defense system long before the relationship even begins. It is not something they consciously choose. It is something their mind created to survive earlier emotional experiences. Somewhere in their past, closeness did not feel safe. It may have felt overwhelming. It may have felt controlling. It may have felt unpredictable. And when a young mind faces emotional environments that feel unstable or suffocating, it learns a powerful lesson. The safest place is independence, so the brain builds protection. It learns how to rely only on itself. It learns how to stay emotionally self-sufficient. It learns how to reduce vulnerability. Over time, this strategy becomes automatic. It becomes part of their identity. They begin to believe that needing someone else is dangerous. They begin to believe that emotional dependence leads to loss of control. For many years, this strategy works perfectly. It allows them to function, succeed, and move through life without feeling exposed. But romantic relationships change everything, because relationships require something their defense system was designed to avoid. Emotional closeness. A relationship slowly asks two people to lower their walls. It asks them to share fears, needs, and expectations. It asks them to allow another person into their emotional space. For most people, this deepens connection. But for an avoidant partner, this moment activates a hidden conflict. Part of them may genuinely enjoy the relationship. They may appreciate your presence. They may even feel strong affection. Yet another part of their mind begins reacting with discomfort. The closer the bond becomes, the louder that internal tension grows. It does not always appear in obvious ways. Sometimes it shows up as small irritation over minor things. Sometimes they suddenly feel exhausted by conversations that once felt normal. Sometimes they start focusing on imperfections that never seemed important before. The mind quietly begins collecting reasons to create distance. And here is something very important that many people misunderstand. Avoidant individuals rarely say, "I am afraid of closeness." Instead, their brain translates that discomfort into logical explanations. They may tell themselves that the relationship is moving too fast. They may believe they need more personal space. They may convince themselves that something about the connection feels wrong. To them, these explanations feel completely real. But underneath those explanations is something much deeper. Their nervous system is trying to restore emotional balance. It is trying to return to the level of independence where they feel in control again. This is why the emotional wall begins forming, not in one dramatic moment, not with a sudden declaration. It builds slowly through behavior. Communication becomes lighter. Personal conversations become rare. They start protecting their inner world again. For the person who loves them, this shift can feel extremely painful. You remember the warmth they once showed. You remember the openness they once shared. So when you notice the change, your instinct is to bring the connection back to what it used to be. You try to talk about the distance. You try to ask what is wrong. You try to remind them of the bond you built together. These reactions are completely natural. Human beings are wired to repair emotional disconnection. But something unexpected happens in this dynamic. Every attempt to close the emotional gap can feel like pressure to an avoidant partner. Questions may feel like demands. Emotional conversations may feel overwhelming. Attempts to reconnect may feel like expectations they cannot handle. So their mind reacts in the only way it knows how to restore comfort. It moves further away. The more intense the emotional pursuit becomes, the more powerful their instinct for space becomes. This is not cruelty, it is a defense mechanism that has been strengthened for years. And slowly, something begins to change inside the relationship. The avoidant partner begins associating the relationship with emotional tension rather than ease. Even small interactions can start feeling heavy. Their mind starts anticipating conversations that require emotional depth. And because they want to escape that discomfort, they create more distance. Meanwhile, the other person often becomes even more determined to repair the connection. They invest more energy. They search for solutions. They try to prove their love more clearly. But in this specific psychological pattern, effort alone does not create closeness. Instead, it can unintentionally strengthen the avoidant wall. This is the moment when many relationships enter a dangerous emotional cycle. One person begins reaching forward with increasing urgency. The other person begins stepping backward with increasing resistance. Neither person intends to hurt the other. Both are simply responding to their own emotional instincts. One is seeking connection. The other is seeking relief from emotional pressure. And without awareness of this pattern, the distance between them quietly grows wider. The avoidant partner may still stay in the relationship. They may still communicate occasionally. From the outside, it may look like things are simply going through a rough phase, but internally, their mind is slowly reorganizing how they see the connection. Instead of seeing the relationship as a place of comfort, they begin experiencing it as a source of emotional demand. And when the human brain begins linking a relationship with stress instead of safety, something critical starts forming beneath the surface. An invisible barrier. A boundary inside their mind that quietly prepares them for emotional separation. Most people never notice when this moment begins forming. They only notice the growing distance. They only feel the confusion and the silence. When emotional distance continues long enough, something very quiet begins to happen inside the avoidant partner's mind. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is a slow internal shift that most people never see until it is already too late. At this stage, the connection may still exist on the surface. Conversations might still happen. Time together may still occur occasionally. From the outside, the relationship might look like it is simply going through a difficult period. But inside the avoidant mind, a different process has already begun. The emotional bond starts loosening, not in a visible way at first. It begins with subtle detachment. The avoidant partner slowly stops sharing their deeper thoughts. Personal feelings remain unspoken. Important inner experiences stay locked inside their own world. Instead of opening up, they begin protecting their emotional space more carefully. This change can be extremely confusing for the other person. You may still see them around you, you may still receive messages, you may still have moments where everything feels almost normal again. Those moments create hope. They create the belief that the closeness can return if you just try harder. But something deeper is quietly changing. Inside the avoidant psychology, emotional investment begins decreasing. Their mind starts reducing the level of attachment connected to the relationship. It is a protective response. By lowering emotional involvement, they reduce the pressure they feel inside. The strange part is that they may not even realize they are doing this. Human beings often believe their decisions come from logic, but many choices actually begin inside the nervous system. The body searches for stability. When something feels overwhelming, the brain slowly moves away from it to restore balance. This is how emotional withdrawal develops. At first, it appears as distance. Later, it becomes disconnection. And when this process continues long enough, the relationship approaches a very critical moment. A moment many people never notice while it is forming. The moment when emotional presence quietly disappears. The avoidant partner may still remain physically around for some time. They may still show polite interest. They may still respond occasionally when spoken to, but the deeper attachment that once connected both people begins fading from the inside. This stage often feels extremely painful for the person who still hopes for closeness, because you can sense the difference. Something feels missing. The warmth that once existed feels weaker. The enthusiasm that once appeared naturally is no longer there. Conversations feel empty. Interactions feel mechanical. Instead of emotional connection, there is a strange feeling of distance even when sitting beside each other. Many people react to this stage with even more effort. They become more attentive. They try to fix every misunderstanding. They attempt to bring back the energy that once existed between them. They search for the perfect words that might reopen the emotional door. But inside the avoidant mind, another powerful shift is already happening. Their brain begins redefining the relationship. Instead of seeing the connection as a place of comfort, it becomes linked with emotional heaviness. Interactions begin to feel like obligations rather than natural moments of closeness. The mind starts associating the relationship with effort instead of peace. This internal change slowly strengthens the idea of separation. It does not mean they suddenly hate the other person. It does not mean every positive memory disappears, but the emotional motivation that once kept them deeply involved becomes weaker and weaker. The connection starts feeling distant even in their own mind. And when a person reaches this internal stage, something very important has already happened. They have begun leaving emotionally before leaving physically. This is the moment many psychologists describe as the turning point of detachment. It is the stage where emotional investment becomes so low that reversing the process becomes extremely difficult. Not impossible in every situation, but much harder than most people realize. Because relationships are not only built through actions, they are built through emotional presence. When that presence disappears, the connection loses its foundation. And yet many people continue fighting harder during this exact stage. They increase communication. They push for deeper conversations. They try to repair the bond with stronger emotional effort. But from the avoidant perspective, this often creates the opposite effect. The increased emotional intensity confirms the very pressure their mind was trying to escape. Instead of feeling relief, they feel even more overwhelmed. Instead of feeling drawn back toward the relationship, their instinct to protect their emotional independence becomes stronger. So they move further inward. They become quieter. They create more psychological space. To the person who still hopes for reconnection, this stage can feel heartbreaking. Because the harder you reach forward, the more unreachable the other person appears. But the most painful part is that this process usually happens without clear communication. The avoidant partner rarely announces this internal shift. They rarely explain what is happening inside their mind. They simply become more distant over time, and many people do not realize they are witnessing the formation of a critical psychological boundary. A boundary where emotional detachment has already taken root deep inside the relationship. Once that internal separation becomes strong enough, the relationship begins approaching a stage where returning to the original connection becomes extremely difficult. A quiet line has started forming beneath the surface, a line that many people cross without even realizing it. And when that invisible line is finally crossed, the relationship enters what many describe as the point where everything changes forever, not through words, not through an announcement, but through a deep feeling that something inside the relationship has completely changed. It is the moment when effort no longer brings the connection back. It is the moment when emotional pursuit begins to feel empty. This is the stage many people later describe as the moment they realize they had crossed the point of no return. This moment rarely appears suddenly. It is the result of everything that happened before. All the small steps of distance, all the silent withdrawal, all the emotional protection that slowly grew stronger inside the avoidant partner's mind. Over time, that protection becomes a solid wall. Once that wall becomes strong enough, something very important shifts inside the avoidant psychology. The relationship stops feeling like something they want to move closer to. Instead, it becomes something they feel relief moving away from. This change does not always look dramatic from the outside. In many situations, the avoidant partner may still behave politely. They may still show basic kindness. They may even express appreciation for the time shared together. But the deeper emotional pull that once existed is no longer guiding their actions. Inside their mind, a decision has quietly taken shape. It is not always spoken out loud. Sometimes it is not even fully recognized by them in a clear sentence. But their behavior begins revealing the truth. Their priorities change. Their attention moves elsewhere. Their emotional energy becomes focused on areas of life that feel lighter and less demanding. For the person who remained emotionally invested, this realization can feel extremely heavy, because until this moment, hope still existed. Hope that the distance was temporary. Hope that patience would repair the connection. Hope that love and effort would eventually rebuild what was lost. But when someone finally senses that the emotional bridge has collapsed, a powerful realization begins forming. You cannot force someone to reopen a door they have already closed inside their mind. This truth can be painful, but it is also deeply freeing, because many people in avoidant relationships spend months or even years trying to repair something through constant pursuit. They believe that if they explain their feelings better, if they show more understanding, if they become more patient, the other person will eventually return emotionally. But avoidant psychology does not respond to pressure in the way people expect. When someone already feels overwhelmed by emotional intensity, additional effort can reinforce their desire for distance. The human nervous system always searches for comfort. If closeness begins to feel like pressure, the mind naturally looks for relief. And relief often comes through separation. This is why chasing rarely brings the outcome people hope for. The more someone pushes toward reconnection, the more the avoidant mind may feel the need to protect its independence. Yet something powerful happens when a person finally understands this dynamic. Instead of continuing the exhausting cycle of pursuit, they begin shifting their focus inward. They stop trying to control the other person's emotions. They stop carrying the responsibility of fixing a connection that requires effort from both sides. This shift is not about anger. It is not about revenge. It is about emotional awareness. For the first time, the person who once chased the relationship begins reconnecting with themselves. They begin recognizing their own value. They begin protecting their own emotional energy. They begin understanding that love should not require abandoning personal dignity or self-respect. And something very interesting happens when this internal shift takes place. The emotional balance of the entire situation changes, because when someone stops chasing approval, they stop feeding the pattern that created the imbalance in the first place. The constant pressure disappears. The emotional noise fades. The dynamic that once revolved around pursuit and withdrawal suddenly becomes quiet. In that quiet space, two possible outcomes appear. Sometimes the avoidant partner continues moving forward in their own direction, and the relationship ends permanently. In those situations, the painful truth becomes clear. The connection had already ended emotionally long before the final separation happened. But in other situations, something unexpected occurs. Without the pressure of pursuit, curiosity can slowly return inside the avoidant mind. When emotional demands disappear, their nervous system may begin relaxing again. The space that once felt suffocating becomes calmer. Yet the most important transformation does not depend on what the avoidant partner does next. The real transformation happens inside the person who finally stopped chasing. Because that moment marks the return of personal power. It is the moment someone realizes that their worth does not depend on another person's ability to stay emotionally available. It is the moment someone understands that healthy love does not require constant emotional survival. Relationships should expand your life, not shrink your sense of self. And when someone reaches the point where they no longer abandon themselves to keep someone else close, something remarkable happens. They become stronger, wiser, and emotionally clearer than before. The end of one connection becomes the beginning of deeper self-respect. Because the most powerful lesson hidden inside avoidant relationships is not about how to make someone stay.